Good morning, team. We're going to go over some new updates to the tools and to our asset management. This week, I went to Substance Days at SIGGRAPH and I learned a bunch of good stuff that applies directly to what we're doing. Awesome. So, asset management. So, bunch of new tools come into the project. Mostly today, we're going to focus on some new Unreal materials and some exciting painter stuff. So essentially what we're doing here is Substance has these thing called shelves. It's where all the tools and materials and such smart materials lay inside your project. Now these are all on disk where it's saved in the documents. But you can also create a custom shelf for any custom tools that or whatever that you may create. You can also share those over Perforce, for example. So that's what this is going to be. We have set up. I've set up a custom shelf on the depot that inside it has a new smart material for the cave visuals. So you can visualize that as you're working with any kind of cave texturing. An HDRI, so the lighting is similar to in-game. A substance shader, so that the rendering is just like it is in Unreal in the viewport. So there's no question or of it being here or there. Also 15 export presets for all the new standard materials, as well as any singular texture that you may need, as well as some templates that have all these settings put together. Also, and then the materials that go with them. There's also some Houdini stuff, but the setup for Houdini engine is a little bit involved, so we'll be addressing those with each individual later on in the week. Awesome. Let's go ahead and jump in to showing you some of the stuff and a demo. So first things first, got to make sure you have your Perforce up to date. So you get latest, and now I want you to come to Assets folder. Drop down the Assets and find the Substance folder. Click here, Painter, drop that down, and you'll find a Shelf folder. Right? Now, once you find the Shelf folder, there's a bunch of things that in here, and all of these are the various things that Substance creates when you create a new shelf. And it's all the things that you can put in here. And to pull up the documentation for a quick second, hop out of there. These are all the acceptable file formats. SBARs, HDRIs, PNGs, textures, all kinds of stuff, as well as presets for any kind of brush or whatever you're working with. Awesome. So, how do we set this up? So, let's go back to where we are in Perforce. Right click on the shelf and go Show in Explorer. And this will find us right here. Right? We're going to click on this shelf, open this folder up. We're going to copy this address. Then, with no project open, just like this, we're going to go to Edit, Settings, and then we have an area right here. We're going to copy our path. And you can name it whatever you want, but for simplicity's sake, I just name it Pulverum Souls _ Souls. Then hit this. Now you have connected to the shelf on the server. Now there's also these settings right here for default, and what default means is just when you make a new material or smart material or whatever or preset, it's what whichever shelf on disk that those reside in. So if you want everything that you make to show up in your default shelf or in the Pulverum Souls ones, that's up to you. So we're gonna go ahead and click OK. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and click New File, and then you'll notice that we have a couple templates. We have one for decals and one for standard materials. So we're gonna go and select just a mesh right here, and this is just an example of, I think it's the start hall. So you'll notice that we opened it up right away. We have this environment map, which comes from Unreal. If you want to change any settings, up here in this corner is display settings, and you can change the opacity. You can also change like the blur, as well as the rotation and exposure to whatever you would prefer. Also, right here, shader ball, we have the Unreal Engine 4 material. So you can also, so this should have you set up so everything looks just perfectly like it does in Unreal. Awesome. Now, if we go to shelf, go to our smart materials, and we type in cave to make it a little easier, you will find our new smart material, cave base. So we drop that in here, and we go ahead and go to the walls also and drop it in there. You'll see this is what the smart material does. Let's turn the exposure up a little bit and rotate our environment so we get a nice image of it. That's not bad. All right. Now, this smart material so far isn't super smart. What you can change right here, there's this color that's basically being multiplied. So think of this just like the tint in Unreal Engine. And you can make it be white, or you can play around with any kind of, fun colors. Also, there is the material itself. What you can change on that is the UV tiling, or you can set it to be chart planar, right? So that's all we really have set up at the moment for that. Cool. Now let's go ahead and show the new decal workflow with these new tools. So, all right, cool. So, what was the problem with the old approach? Well, the old approach that we were doing had two problems. There were two different ways that we did it. One, where we just had to spot versions of the materials that were our master materials, and we had switches to click to these decal textures for the cave paint and show them. The downside to this is, one, having that logic inside the master material will add a memory, either a large bulk of memory, or if they're not separated with a switch, it's going to add an additional 2 texture calls, draw calls, to every single material in the game, regardless of whether or not it's showing that cave material. So from a performance standpoint, it's not very good. The other problem is that if you're just painting them, previously, Aaron, you were just painting them in Substance Painter, and you're painting them onto the UVs of the mesh. So since you're painting this really small targeted area of the mesh, even when you export out like a 4K texture, the actual area of texel density that is used for that texture only comes out to be around 512 or so. So there's really low texel density, but you're paying all the costs of a high texture. So that's one downside. The other method was a decal projection. The downside with that is, well, one, it's a projection, so it has projection warping, and doesn't quite look right, especially with our really curvular geometry. And then the big problem was there is a rendering bug with VR right now that is causing those decals to not show up quite correctly in one of the eyes. So we had to devise a workaround, and the workaround is something we're calling mesh decals. So what are mesh decals? They're kind of like normal decals, except we're going to use additional geometry. So the process of this, in your DCC, Maya, basically, although with an optional Houdini tool that we're going to demo just to walk through it. It can be done out of Unreal, and also this tool can be used in Maya, though it's such an easy operation that for the most part, I think this tool will just be used for testing Houdini Engine and Maya integration. But we'll go over it. Basically, you're going to select the area that you want to paint, duplicate that geometry separately, join it, and then make sure that area of the geometry has as much of the UV space as it can get. Take it to Painter, do some magic in there, and then take it back to Unreal. So let's go ahead and do a demo so we have a better understanding. Let's pull up Unreal. So this is Unreal. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the make, first of all, see that the Houdini engine gets restarted, which is going to take a little second to figure itself out. All right, cool. We're going to go to content. And this part you don't really need to follow along. This is just a demo for one of these Houdini tools that does this simple little task. All right, cool. So make sure we're in the right room. All right, we're going to pull this out. So this tool comes with a number of different parameters right here, and it's set up for Maya and Unreal at the time. It should work in both out of the pocket. There's a number of different UV methods. We're going to kind of split past all those things, but there's also this like split method, which is the way that we're separating the UVs. We can use vertex color. Also, we can use, if you're working in Maya, you can use a set, which is, from my understanding, the Houdini equivalent of a group. So if you have any points that you've made into a set, you can also use those. But again, we're just going to go pretty quick right with this. So in this case, we're just going to come down here. It has a geometry input for the first task. We can also change that to be a word outliner. So I'm going to start selection. I'm going to click use that current selection. And now for the second one, since we're just set it to a bounding object, we're going to use a bounding object. In this case, we have a little cube here that's pressed nice and firm up against the wall here. And all these points that are within this cube, we're going to separate those out and use this as our decal area. All right. So same thing here. So just to word outliner, start selection, use current selection. Awesome. And now it's going to calculate and do some of that magic. And we're going to pull this out. Let's see what we get. All right. And now we have, of course, the materials look a little weird because it's just, as it generates the mesh, it sets the vertex color to all white. So it makes things look a little odd. But you see right where we set that cube a moment ago, our decal is now showing up perfectly. And it shows up likewise over here. And it should support normals, AO, and it works in both eyes, the 9 yards. So yeah, cool. Let's go into Houdini for just a quick second, just to visualize what's actually going on here. All right. So in Houdini, so this is the geometry that we have right now, and we have a number of different ways. We can just use a set like in Maya. Right. We can use a vertex color from Houdini, or you can paint vertex color in Maya or Unreal. And we can also do a bounding object, right? So in this case, this is an example. We're just painting the area. So we just painted this out area that we wanted, right? And it's just going to give us these points. And then what we're going to do is we're going to eventually do all this stuff out here. We're going to cut it out by itself. And you notice on the UV shell right here, it's kind of cut out by itself, so it's punched out. And then after the UV, we're just going to try to flatten that all the way here. So you can see that this is a really simple operation. Like, you can really easily do this in Maya by yourself. And then we're just going to take that geometry and our original geometry. We're going to make sure that this separate part right here is set to a separate material by itself. So it will be a separate texture set in Painter. And then we're just going to add it back to itself. And then here's a neat little visualizer that it is in fact two separate pieces of geometry. It's going to fly out a little bit. All right. So what that allows us to do in Painter is, if I go to new, I'm just going to go to our decal, setup, select mesh, hit OK, discard. Now you'll notice something that's a little different on this one is that we do show you these the wireframe, so that way it's a little bit helpful when you're working with alpha type materials. And you'll notice another difference about the decal setup is that we have opacity also. So by default this one comes set up with 4, but you can also set it to the metallic alpha. Cool. So we're gonna go ahead and drag in that smart material that we had from earlier. Just drag it on everything. All right. And we also have this decal area. We're going to drag it on that too. So How we're actually going to do this is we just going to hide our walls. And this is the area that got punched out from my block area layer. And we're going to come up here is we're going to have our paint layer. And I think for me, it just makes the most sense to do a simple paint layer first. That's just the opacity, right? And we're going to set that to 1. And we're going to cycle C until we get to opacity. And then let's just find ourselves a cooler looking alpha. Yeah, this one's kind of cool looking. And, you know, we can get a little grungy in here. But the whole idea is this is the area that's really just going to show up. And if we go back to M, oh, yes. We also, sorry, my apologies. You also need to drop down a fill layer beneath that paint layer. Set it also to opacity. And you need that one to just be set to black. That way it knows like which parts are, you know, blacked out, because otherwise there's no information, right? Cool. Now that we have that, we're going to toss another little paint layer in here. Come back to here. And we're just going to turn on opacity. We're going to turn on our color, our height, our roughness, and our normal. That's mostly what we need. And here it's just, you know, paint work. You know, you can just get real fun. See what we got right here. I make this maybe like a little fun red. You can control this if you want the paint to be, you know, really simple painter stuff. If you want the paint to have a little bit of a normal map, a thick off, you just give a little bit of height there, and we can paint out, you know, a little icon. We can do some stamps, whole 9 yards. We can also back it up a little bit, right? And there you go. Now we're gonna go ahead and switch to a painter file that we had done up a little bit already as an example. Awesome. Set it to triplanar. All right, cool. So same thing we had earlier. Go to texture sets, disable this. You notice we have this nice little cave paint little thing here, right? And we can go through it, see the base color, all those things, right? Now the important thing to have is to make sure that you basically just this preview material, when you're exporting, you want to just make that invisible so that only your decal decal layers get sent through. Then you just go up to here to File, Export Textures, and you'll notice in the config now at the very top, there's a bunch of new things set up. So on mine, it's duplicated because I have multiple things set up trying to test this. But in yours, will just show, you know, one of each. So this is a standard material set, which gives us 2 textures. So we're really pushing that the packs, but also the decal gives us 2 textures, which are slightly different, as well as, you know, each individual texture as well as each individual pack. You know, in case you just need one little texture and you're opening up a file and so forth. And if we come back to Unreal, you'll see that is in fact the texture, which is right here. So what a couple downsides from this is that it does have because it's working with the tessellation, at certain far angles it will start to kind of blend in and out. Yeah, with the darkness in the game, I don't think it's a super concern, but and this one I think is also set up where it's not using the normal. We have it set up with our standard materials here, where you can, if you scroll all the way up here, there's decal master, decal simple, and the difference between these two is that one is using one texture sample, just storing the opacity in the alpha channel, and the other one is using 2 channels and has a normal setup on it. Cool. So yeah, the visual quality of these things are gonna increase as we go, but right now these tools are all working. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys have questions about. Within our master folder in our materials, we have a new standard material, M standard and MI standard. So if we open that up, it just has basic controls over our textures and color, as well as spots here to switch out the textures. So whenever you make a simple asset, the bulk majority, this is meant for like the bulk majority of the assets that you would be painting, you can just export your textures, make a material instance of this, and just plop them in super quick. Couldn't be easier. And the same thing goes for the decals and the new updates soon to be to the cave system. Let me know if you guys have any questions, or if there's anything else I can help you with. Don't feel afraid to hit me up on Discord.